Hello, I'm Brian. I'm a first year here, and I just want to say it's a privilege to have you tonight. And my question is, what policy initiatives would you recommend that the U.S. take unilaterally, bilaterally, and multilaterally in addressing the trade imbalances resulting from our relationship with China, particularly in regards to their currency manipulation?
Without getting too much into the weeds, let me just say that our best economic policy for China is getting our own house in order here in the United States. Because we can't deal at a macro level on currencies until we address our imbalances right here at home. And we can't compete on the world stage unless we get back on our feet with a sense of confidence behind this economy. And China, for its own economic growth, is going to have to address reform around the state-owned enterprises. And that's going to happen, if it does, sometime next year with the rise of Xi Jinping, who will be the new leader after next week is passed. And he will lead the fifth generation forward. And in his mind, I am confident, is an understanding that in order to get the balance right with the United States economically, from a global, a regional, and bilateral standpoint, he's going to have to tame the state-owned enterprises, which in China for too long have written their own rule book, and markets have not opened as planned under the agreement with the World Trade Organization, and they're going to have to continue appreciating their currency, because it's woefully undervalued. All of that will be an important part of what China must do. And there's also stuff that we have to do here in order to get into that and get our relationship where it's the most important economic relationship this world has ever seen. And I had a journalist from Chinese television in a couple of days ago who said, well, you know, terrible things are happening. America's criticizing China on telecommunications business, and we've got a new WTO case on auto parts. And I said, listen, this is a $500 million relationship. What do you expect? I mean, we still have Airbus cases with Europe that are highly sensitive. We have softwood lumber with Canada, some of our greatest friends in the world. With an increase in volume will come trade problems. That's to be expected, and nobody should be surprised by that. We're going to read about them all the time. The question will be, can we in good faith and with a sense of confidence and purpose and resolve sit down at the negotiating table on both sides and find solutions? Of course we can if we put our minds to it, and if we have a sense of trust that underlies it all. But right now it's not there. And we've got a couple of years now to build that up. Yes?
Sorry. My name is John Simon. I'm a freshman, majoring in business and political science, so I hope your father's advice about having a fallback works as well for me as it did for you. My question's mostly centered around China. So, given the fact that outgoing President Hu Jintao has essentially, in his outgoing speech to the National Congress, continued to extol all the maxims that we constantly hear from the Communist Party, such as the virtues of one-party rule, the power of state-owned enterprises and their reforms. Do you have any sort of speculation on whether or not possible new members to the Statement Committee, whether they might be more open to kind of liberalizing markets and liberalizing the political system? And how feasible do you think that is, given the possible leadership transition that's taking place?
So just very quickly, we're starting now, next week, the fifth generation of leadership in China. And Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, and now Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping will be surrounded on the standing committee of the Politburo, which is effectively the board of directors, by about 6 others. It'll go from 9 to 7, changing in 2002-16 party Congress. And around him will be people like probably Hu Zhongzhong, Shanghai, maybe Wang Yang from Guangzhou, Wang Qishan, who has a very solid and pragmatic grasp of the role in international affairs. I think they know that reform must occur. You can't say anything in this exalted atmosphere this week beyond a few references to reform. The work will begin after Xi Jinping consolidates his power, which may take 6 months, with the party, with the People's Liberation Army, and with the Princeton population. I have no doubt that he knows what must be done on the reform side. It's a question of when and how aggressive he pursues it. But this generation, I think, you know, when you stop to say what is in their interest is preservation of the party. The party is not preserved unless the economy works. Therefore, everything they do and all of their decisions are the heart and soul of making the economy work. Building up 6, 7, 8% GDP growth year over year. And that's what's going to be in their minds over the next little while, along with things like how do you deal with the internet in a closed society. You can't be an innovative, creative, entrepreneurial country, which is what China ultimately aspires to be when you block the internet. I think they're going to have to come up with a better defined internet policy, which I think is going to happen too. So right around the corner, I think we're going to see some issues play out under Xi Jinping. Who's fairly pragmatic, who's confident, who has DNA in his genes, if you look at what his father did in earlier generations. And the question, I think, will then become, is the United States ready to engage with China? To help support, to nudge, to put forward what really needs to be a relationship. And I'll just end with this thought. The cycles of the U.S.-China relationship are very distinct. And most of the time, we have a very hard time getting together on common ground. We have elections, in which case it's a whole lot easier for a politician to say what they're going to do to China as opposed to with China. And in China, you know, they don't have elections, but you got to believe that the party has similar conversations. And I've seen that when I've gone out to local universities in China. But we're entering a time here, re-elected president of the United States, 5th generation leadership now coming to the forefront of China. We'll have 2 to 3 years of unencumbered runway. And it's a hugely important opening for this most important relationship in the 21st century to get it right. And I just hope that on our side, we've got some clear thinking about what our interests are and how we're going to approach China to make this relationship work. Because we've got a whole bunch of people around the world who are going to be increasingly dependent on the long-term stability and goodwill that's built into this relationship. Thank you.
Our positioning in relation to Asia, how should we think of ourselves in a world with China as the other major economic power?
Well, it's inevitable. You can't take a country with a landmass like China's, which is roughly the size of ours. I put India in an emerging category as well. You can't have 1.3 billion people, access to natural resources, and secure trade links with most of the major markets of the world, and not expect them to grow. So it shocks me sometimes when people are surprised to hear that China's moving up. Well, we move up too, but just do the math. You know, if you've got an economy that's growing 6 to 8% per year, over time your GDP is going to be so large, and at some point they probably will overtake the United States, maybe by 2020, in terms of sheer output. But we forget as well that for the last 20 centuries, with the exception of 2, China was the leading economy in the world. And India was probably number 2. You just go back to the Jacksonian period of American politics, you know, the early-ish part of the 1800s. And you had China and India. I think the United States was number 9 in the lineup back then. So it really was kind of an anomaly of sorts that the UK moved up when they did. They pretty much owned, you know, the 19th century. We pretty much owned the 20th century. And the world continues to shift. It isn't a static place. And China will continue to grow. India will continue to grow. Brazil will continue to grow. But when you look at the per capita numbers, which is quality of life, per capita income, our nimble and creative system we have here in the United States. Those are hard things to capture. They really are. And I would say that China's 75 to 100 years, if ever, away from catching the United States in per capita income, quality of life that we have here. So the relationship with China will be the relationship of the 21st century. It's the most important relationship of your era, those of you who are students here. So getting around to recognizing that and contributing to something that might help to build it, because it doesn't matter which pursuit you enter, you'll at some point encounter the relationship with China, whether in business, finance, whether in law, whether in medicine, whether in academia, whether in government service. That's just where the 21st century will take us. And India will be a strong player on the heels of that as well. There's a shifting dynamic in the world, and it isn't to be feared, it's to be expected. And we just have to do what we do best in this country. We're a creative, innovative bunch of people. We're an optimistic bunch. We're a bunch of problem solvers, although recent history would suggest we're not very good at solving our problems. We got to get back to doing a little bit more of that. But it's a relationship that we're going to have to figure out how to deal with. And when I say deal with, I'm referring to the reality today that we're married, we're interconnected economically, increasingly culturally, and divorce isn't an option. You have to make the damn thing work. And that's the thing that the political class just doesn't seem to get. Because it's easier to talk, when you're talking about China, about what you're going to do to China, as compared to what you're going to do with China. Now, this country needs a very healthy discussion about what we're going to do with China, because it's not going away anytime soon. And it's in everybody's interest to figure out how to resolve some of our economic issues, to have a dialogue on security and military relations, and to figure out how to deal in a world that is evolving very, very quickly in terms of rising powers.